dangerously close to OLED. That's a phrase TV geeks love to hear when talking about mini LED TVs, especially when that mini LED TV costs way less than an OLED TV. So, does the Hisense U8N get dangerously close to OLED for a fraction of the price? Let's talk about that. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and in today's video, we're gonna dive into the Hisense U8N TV. Now, I'm gonna pop up the suggested retail prices for you, understanding that these will change over time, but for reference, the 65-inch U8N I'm showing you here goes for just under $1,500. I'll put that into context for you a little bit later in the video. Now, before I get into the U8N here, I want to tell you about a little change in strategy that I'm implementing for this review. And if y'all like it, I'll do it for as many TVs as I can this year. I'm gonna have a Nit Nerd section of this review in which I dive into some of the measurement numbers and some of the deeper TV enthusiast type stuff. That's not gonna change, but I am going to reserve some of the super deep nitty gritty stuff for a future comparison video. The reason behind that decision is that a lot of that super deep stuff is more meaningful in the context of a comparison to another TV, or TVs, plural. So if you are one of my Nit Nerd fam and you find that there's more you want to know about this TV after you've watched the whole review, worry not, it will be covered in a future video, and I would encourage you to leave your unanswered questions for me down in the comments so I can attack as many of them as I possibly can in that next video. Cool? Awesome. Now, let's talk about the U8N here. Now, for anyone who doesn't follow TVs closely, the Hisense U8 series has been something of a hit for TV enthusiasts on a budget over the past few years. It has reliably offered picture quality that punches so high, it kind of calls into question the way other brands price their TVs. A lot of folks who have bought the U8 series after my recommendation have told me they feel like they stole something because the price to picture performance ratio is just off the charts. And you'll be pleased to know now that the U8N carries on that legacy. In some ways, it does get dangerously close to OLED. In other ways, it does not, and we'll cover that. But if there was any doubt in your mind about whether the Hisense U8N really is a hype-worthy TV worth your consideration, I'm here to tell you it very much is. TVs are about more than just picture quality, though. Even though it's a great deal, the U8N is still a long-term investment that costs a chunk of change. A lot of you are going to interact with this thing on a daily basis, and I know you want to enjoy owning this TV. So we're going to talk a bit about all the other touch points you'll want to know about before you pull the trigger. So let's start with what this TV is. It's a mini LED backlit quantum dot LCD TV. Hisense calls it ULED, but it competes directly with QLED TVs marketed by other brands. Those mini LEDs are densely packed and broken down into a bunch of individual dimming zones in an effort to deliver both high brightness and deep black levels, which combine for awesome contrast. The quantum dots in use help expand the number of colors that the TV can produce, and they help make for brighter colors as well. The U8N runs on the Google TV platform, which means that just about every streaming app you could possibly want is available, and navigating the TV is intuitive and easy. Google TV makes it easy to pick up where you left off on shows or movies that you watch across a wide array of apps. YouTube and YouTube TV are especially well integrated since those are Google properties. You have access to Google Assistant for voice search and information, and for that specifically, you can either use the remote or you can enable a built-in always listening microphone for hands-free Google Assistant. You get a full-size remote that has just the right amount of buttons, including dedicated settings button, an input selector button, volume, channel control, play, pause, menu button, even a profile hotkey, so family members can switch to their Google TV profile and YouTube accounts so everyone gets their own feed. And the remote is backlit, so you can see what you're pressing in the dark. The U8N supports HDR10, HDR10+, Dolby Vision, and HLG. It has two HDMI inputs that support 4K up to 144 Hz for you gamers out there, and it does support VRR and is FreeSync Premium Pro certified. Also, it does have an ATSC 3.0 tuner in it for the latest broadcast TV standard. In short, it's a very full-featured TV with all the bells and whistles you would expect for a TV at this level. And I am super pleased to report that the U8N is a snappy and responsive TV. I can click around through all these tiles and apps, and there is no noticeable lag, no matter how impatiently I click around, which is a big deal to me. I hate waiting for a TV to catch up to my clicks. Apps load really quickly too, and there's nothing funky or unexpected about how you operate in those apps as far as how to access extra features or how you pause or scrub back and forth through content. It's just a super easy to use TV. Now there is one user interface quirk, and it's a little thing, but for whatever reason, it really sticks in my craw. That is, when you turn the volume all the way down, you're stuck with this mute icon, as if you've pressed the mute button on the TV. There's no way to get rid of this if your volume is down at 0, so far as I know. Also, while the TV does pop up a Dolby Vision icon when you're watching Dolby Vision content, it doesn't do that for HDR10, and I'm just concerned that this may cause folks to think they aren't getting HDR when they really are. There's no indication that the picture mode that you're in is HDR either, which I think might further the concern. But I can assure you, when you feed this TV an HDR10 or HDR10 Plus signal, it is definitely going into HDR. Now, in the unboxing video, I showed you the pedestal style stand, which can be placed in 2 heights, a raised option if you're using a soundbar and a lower option for a sleeker look. And I showed you the stability and the cable management. I also showed you these subwoofer drivers on the back, but I didn't talk about how the TV sounds. So let me do that now. This TV sounds great, guys. Now, admittedly, the bar for built-in TV speaker sound is set pretty low. Most of them just sound like crap, but this TV really does sound better than most TVs on the market. Part of what makes it sound so good is the hearty amount of bass that it puts out. And saying hearty amount of bass, that kind of sells it short. The depth and the presence of the bass that this TV puts out rivals some of the subwoofers that you would find in inexpensive soundbar systems. In some ways, it's actually better bass because it's so well integrated with the TV's downfiring speakers. Now, I haven't tested the sound with the TV wall mounted, but mounted on a stand like this, it sounds really far better than I think any of you will be expecting. So if you get this TV, be prepared for that pleasant surprise when you crank up your favorite music video or movie. The TV also does well at delivering clear dialogue, but don't expect much in the way of surround effects or stereo separation. I just mean that the TV on the whole has a big, robust sound to it that will not have you racing back to the store for a soundbar because the built-in sound is so terrible. All right, we're about halfway through this video, and that means it's time to talk about picture quality. And that can only mean one thing. It's time for numbers for nit nerds. Now, for those of you who don't want to geek out on measurement data and such, please feel free to skip ahead to the next section. There's a timecode link down below, and I'll recap all the key takeaways so you don't miss out on anything crucial, all right? But for my nit nerd fam, here we go. To test the Hisense U8N, I used a SpectraCal C6 profiled to an X-Rite i1 Pro 2 using CalMan Ultimate by Portrait Displays. I started out measuring by using the default settings in the filmmaker mode picture preset, and that little detail right there is super important. So let's just get into that. Hisense is chosen for its default filmmaker mode preset, typically a very purist-oriented, accurate picture mode, that it would have the TV's automatic light sensor turned on, with auto white balance also turned on. Now, from a purist perspective, this is a no-no. At least I think that's the perception. But for most folks, I actually think this is a good idea. One of the chief complaints about filmmaker mode is that it is often too dark or that it lacks vibrancy. That's because filmmaker mode is designed to look right if you're viewing the TV in pretty much a pitch black room. And most folks simply don't do that. I have a whole video coming out about filmmaker mode soon, so keep an eye out for that. Anyway, I do like the idea that a user can select filmmaker mode on the U8N and not be doomed to an overly dark picture, causing them to bounce off to use some other picture mode. Though Theater Day is not too shabby for a brighter picture mode. However, because I have to level the playing field, I went and I turned this off. The other super important thing for you to know is that the warm 1 color temperature setting that is used by default in filmmaker mode is, as I will soon show you, quite accurate in most respects. The warm 2 color temperature setting, however, is very much not. I know I've said this in prior years, but I've always felt it odd that Hisense would make warm 2, which is usually a warmer color temp setting on other brands, the cooler of the 2 options on this TV. The blue channel is way aggressive in the 2-point white balance. This results in very vibrant, very cool, crisp whites and grays, and it appears to be even brighter to the eye. But from an accuracy standpoint, it kind of doesn't feel like this is what you should be getting in the filmmaker mode preset. I should also mention that warm 1 being accurate and warm 2 being kind of inaccurate is true across the theater day and theater night settings as well. So if you want accurate white balance and more accurate colors, the warm 1 color temp setting is your friend. Now, here's the measurements. In SDR, the default filmmaker mode setting plus the local dimming and peak brightness settings at high, which again seems to buck the intention of filmmaker mode, but I digress. With those default settings, peak brightness in SDR measured over 1,300 nits for a 10% window. Guys, that's very bright for SDR. 2-point white balance came in looking awesome with delta errors of less than 3 for both the 30 and 100% stimulus measurements, and that is great. And as we track the grayscale, errors stay below the visible threshold throughout. All right, that's exactly what we want to see from a really high-end TV. Color accuracy in SDR was also very good. We see some minor errors in blue and cyan, but nothing to get worked up over considering this is a stock picture mode without any calibration done to it. Moving now to HDR and the news I know a lot of you want to hear. Peak brightness from a 10% white window came in at over 3,500 nits, and full screen white measured a solid 1,000 nits. Without a doubt, this TV can get extremely bright, and that's going to be a trend here for the rest of the review. Now, the white balance in HDR was not nearly as accurate as it was in SDR. As we creep up to those super bright levels, you can see the TV's white balance skewing heavily in favor of blue. This does not mean that your TV will look blue. This just means that whites will have a very cool color temp. And some folks like that in the bright whites. It's just not technically accurate, so I have to point this out. And this can, by the way, be corrected by a calibrator. Color accuracy was very respectable in HDR as well. We see some visible errors in the most challenging colors, but nothing to be upset about. We're still talking excellent performance, especially for the price of this TV. And finally, if we look at DCI-P3 and BT 2020 color gamut coverage, we're looking at about 98% and 83% coverage, respectively. One thing, actually, I have got to point out. The EOTF, that's electro-optical transfer function tracking, is pretty hot. There's no getting around that. This TV over-brightens HDR at pretty much every level. And I'm going to show you what that looks like shortly. It's not an issue for most folks, and in fact, some would argue it is preferred by most folks that HDR be juiced up a bit. But from a measurements perspective, I think the HDR performance skews a little outside of what I was hoping to see, especially because I like to think of the Hisense U8 series as the budget videophile's dream. And I still think it is, though we'll want to see how the competition does around this price point. I'll just take note that what I'm commenting on here is default settings. If you back down the peak brightness setting or the local dimming setting, you can get that EOTF curve to track just right. You just lose a little bit of brightness. I kind of wish Hisense treated filmmaker mode as the purists setting and stuck to tracking the EOTF a little more faithfully with the out-of-the-box setting and kept the bright white HDR highlights a bit closer to accurate. I mean, you could always make the theater day and theater night modes more interpretive, you know? But there's no doubt about it, the U8N has character. And when we put the science nerd tools away and we get to watching, wow. This TV delivers a lot of wow factor and visual impact. Now, if you're just rejoining us after skipping the Nit Nerd section, The key takeaways are that the Hisense U8N is capable of being a very accurate TV in SDR, but it likes to get a bit spirited with the brightness in HDR, which I think most folks are gonna like a lot. This TV is zesty. It's got a lot of vim, vigor, and spirit to the picture, and it will dazzle you. It's one of the brightest TVs on the market, certainly under the $4,000 mark, but it handles that brightness with an air of sophistication, which I respect. I mean, it's hard not to just love watching this TV. 4K SDR and 4K HDR content looks fantastic. All your favorite Netflix, Disney+, Max, Apple TV Plus shows, they are going to look outstanding. And I'm thrilled to report that lower resolution cable and satellite TV also looks outstanding. Lesser TVs will really show a lot of color banding and blockiness on lower quality programming, but the U8N appears to be doing a pretty impressive job of cleaning it up. And this is definitely a step up from last year's U8K. The U8N does seem to have an Achilles heel in its processing though, and that's moire. As you can see here, it can struggle with super fine line patterns like this gentleman's jacket on this MSNBC show. It shows less with higher resolution content, but it just goes to show there is still a little room for improvement in the processing world. Though I should point out that we are now very much in torture test territory here, where most TVs will absolutely fall apart. It's just a question of to what degree they fall apart. Color, contrast, vibrancy, all look outstanding here. Here's another example. This show is in 720p, but the U8N cleans it up really nicely. Not a ton of color banding or macro blocking. It looks totally respectable. So if you watch a lot of cable or satellite TV, I think you'll be really pleased with the U8N. As for motion, Hisense has a film motion setting that does a really solid job of reducing judder in 24 frame per second film content. I've had no issues watching movies on this television. For fast motion sports, well, it's kind of hard to show you anything here because sports content gets us flagged faster than anything else, but I watched a soccer match and the fast-paced motion looked really solid. Where the image kind of fell apart was in large blocks of color during super fast motion. You could see some blur creeping and blocking creeping in because the signal's bit rate wasn't keeping up with the demands of the content. And this is nearly impossible for a TV to clean up, so I can't score the U8N down for this. I will say though, that you can engage the motion smoothing tech in this TV, and while it will bring in motion smoothing artifacts, you can get smoother sports that way, and I think folks are going to appreciate that a lot. Now, as many of you already know, I am not a hardcore gamer, and I prefer to leave gaming commentary to others, but I did do some casual gaming and both SDR and HDR looked solid in game mode. I wasn't able to sense any notable input lag for what I played, and historically, the U8 series has super low input lag, so that's no surprise. What I did not test was super high frame rate gaming at high resolution, but I look forward to seeing what others have to say about that myself. Plus, we'll dig in a bit deeper into gaming in a comparison video. I will say though, the casual gamers will be absolutely thrilled with this TV. Okay then, so does the Hisense U8N get dangerously close to OLED? Well yes, in some very key ways, it does. I had the LG G4 set up below the U8N for a while and I did some direct comparisons. First thing I'll point out is that the U8N's backlight control so far has been nothing short of outstanding. I was a little concerned with all the zones it was trying to manage that it might get a little bit sluggish, but it hasn't. The backlight system has been basically undetectable. The black levels are superb. Low luminance performance has been surprisingly good, though I haven't gotten to the torture tests just yet, but I am very optimistic. But just the contrast, color saturation, blooming, and halo control, at this price, it's borderline unbelievable. If you've never owned an OLED TV before, the U8N could absolutely fool you into believing that it was one. Save two factors. One, as you can see, it's over brightening HDR a little. You can see that in this little illuminated area here, and you can see that it isn't appropriately dark coming out of shadows here. But the one thing that really prevents this TV from slam dunking OLED at half the price, it's the off-angle viewing. The U8N has a pretty tight optimum viewing window. You really need to be sitting right in front of it to get all the rich, deep goodness. When you step too far off to the side, you lose color saturation and contrast. Bonus points for not seeing a ton of backlight bleed, which I owe to the dense mini LED system and high dimming zone count, but there's no getting around the fact that where OLED holds up well at extreme angles, the U8N can't quite keep up, and that's true of pretty much every LCD TV out there. Now for TV enthusiasts, this comes as no surprise, but as mini LED TVs go, I swear the U8N is the most OLED-like TV I've tested to date in terms of black levels and overall contrast. It's just a truly remarkable TV. Is it still the budget videophile's dream? I'm gonna go ahead and say yes for now. I do wish that a few measurements were a bit more exacting, but if I take off my nerd hat and just speak to the world about this TV, it's freaking awesome to behold. Easily one of the best buys of 2024, maybe even the best buy of the year. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. What do you think of the Hisense U8N so far? Drop those comments down below. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more. I'll see you on the next one, and until then, here's 2 other videos I think you might like.